Hello, so today I'm going to be filming my February wrap-up, but this is only part one because I've been reading a lot in February, but I've had such a good reading month. Such a good reading month. You know when you get those months where just everything you read you enjoy? Or more or less. I've had one of those months. There hasn't been a single book I've picked up and really truly hated. So that's been really good. So I'm going to try not to waffle. Let's get on to the books. Also, it is just bloody hot in South Africa today and I am just... I don't normally say this, but winter would be nice right now. So the first book I read in February was Undying by Michel Faber. I'm trying really hard to start my months with a poetry collection because they're quick to read and I feel quite cultured and good for having read some poetry, and I've got a book out the way because they're so quick. I can read them in like an afternoon on the weekend and that's really nice. So this month it was this one. Now I already knew I loved Michel Faber because I read The Book of Strange New Things in December last year and it was one of my top 10 books of 2016, so I was very, very keen to read some of his poetry, and I loved this. This is such a stunning poetry collection. It is about Michel's wife, Eva, who got cancer and sadly passed away, and the poems track everything from Michel meeting her, to finding out she had cancer, to her journey with cancer, to her passing away, and then Michel having to move on afterwards. And I have to say there was no one real poem that really stood out for me and made me go, okay, this is the best poem, this is the one I'm going to come back to and want to look at again and again. Just overall, I felt like the collection really worked. I liked the fact that you felt like you were going on this linear journey with the author through each poem and sort of had a beginning, a middle and end. It was sort of like reading a book. So if you're new to poetry, this would be really good because it follows a timeline and sort of follows a story, but it is very emotional. Very, very emotional. Beautiful and very raw and honest, but emotional and angry. I mean, of course it's emotional and angry. His wife is dying of cancer. So I loved it. I really, really enjoyed it. It was such a nice way to start the month, and it's beautiful as well, if you can see all of the beauty. I really enjoyed this. Particularly if you're new to poetry, I think you'd enjoy it because of the timeline and because they're very easy to read poems. They're not particularly fancy. And yeah, as a collection, I think it works brilliantly. No one real stand-up poem, but all together, I think it's really great. Now, the next book I read is a bit of a funny one because I liked it and I didn't like it, which is how I tend to feel about this author. So it was A Movable Feast by Ernest Hemingway. Now, I've only read one other Ernest Hemingway. I've read The Garden of Eden and I had mixed feelings about that one as well. I sort of enjoyed it but also felt like it was a bit weird, and I sort of felt like that about A Movable Feast as well. Now I was really excited to read this because essentially it is Hemingway writing about being a writer in the 20s in Paris, and I was like, you don't need to sell this more to me. That is just awesome and I need to read that. But so the aspects I did like about it were, I really like Hemingway when he's talking about his writing process. I really like the bits in the beginning where he's talking about how he didn't have a lot of money, but he could afford to still go on like a picnic with his wife if they just bought some cheap bread and cheese and things, and then they could sit and he'd think about writing and being in Paris and being young. There was one particular section I really liked where an older, not sure what she was, but an older woman says to Hemingway that his generation is lost, and he says all generations are lost, which I really agree with because that's just true, isn't it? Everyone's lost, just in different ways. So there are aspects I enjoyed. When Hemingway was talking about writing, I enjoyed that. When he was talking about his process, I found that interesting. But the second he introduced somebody else, another character, I was gone. I lost interest and I found the conversations weird and stilted. I didn't understand them or the point of them, and there were some aspects in which I thought Hemingway was just a bit odd and occasionally a bit of an arse, and there's this one really long chapter on F. Scott Fitzgerald, and I was just like, what am I reading? Who were these people? So I don't know if I'd recommend it or not. I think it was interesting. It was interesting, but it wasn't what I was looking for, and that I thought the idea of reading about writing and being in Paris in the 20s was going to be really fascinating, and that was mainly what the book was going to be about. But there were so many bits where I was just like, what? Why? And that's something I've noticed with Hemingway, I've noticed in The Garden of Eden as well, is that he tends to write in a very simple way, but occasionally his conversations are just so odd. They're unfinished. Like, people will say things and it's like you're missing context to understand why they're saying what they're saying. So those are my issues with it. But I did like parts of it. And I liked certain ideas in it. So I read it if you are really interested, but don't think, like I thought that it's going to be this sort of romanticized version of writing in the 20s. It's not. And be prepared for a bit of strangeness. Yeah. That being said, the next book I read, I adored. It made me feel so good, and every time I put it down I just wanted to pick it up again. You know, sometimes when you're reading, you have to get into it. You go, okay, I'm going to read now, and you pick up your book and it takes a few pages before you're into it again. This book I was just so excited to pick up all the time, and I read it so quickly because of that, which was also kind of sad because I wanted more. It was great. And it is Fangirl by Rowell, and I know I'm so behind on this. Everyone's read this by now. Everyone knows it's great by now. I'm not the first person to tell you this. I'm probably about the millionth, but oh, I love this book. I love this book so much. It is basically about twins called Kath and Ren, but mainly it follows Kath as they go to university, and at university Ren is sort of breaking away and she wants to go party and do her own thing and have her own life, and Kath is really shy and she's quite a loner. She likes to sit in a room and write fan fiction. For the record, I relate to the wanting to sit alone in your room and write. So she struggles to adjust to being at university, and she worries about her dad, and she struggles to make friends, but it's such a feel-good book. I related to Kath so much, which I think a lot of people do. I really felt like I understood her. A lot of her feelings about going to uni were my feelings about going to uni. I also struggled to adapt to being at university, but I loved it. And I loved all the characters. All the characters are genuinely great. Kath's roommate Reagan is amazing. Even Ren ends up being really nice. Kath's dad is great. And there's a lot of issues that get touched on in this book, but never in a way that makes you feel bogged down by them. So it touches on mental health, it touches on being a loner, it touches on changing family dynamics that you have to deal with. It touches on a lot of things that are actually quite deep, but without you walking away from it going, whoa, I just read something really heavy. So please read this. If you haven't already, if you were behind like me, please read this. It will make you feel great. It will make you feel really, really good. My one complaint, the fan fiction Kath writes, there are extracts of it scattered throughout the book, and I didn't really enjoy that. I didn't think it added anything to the story, but Rainbow Rowell has written a book called Carry On, which is Kath's fan fiction, essentially, in novel format, and I've heard it's quite different to the fan fiction in here, so I kind of want to read it. Also, I've just fallen in love with Rainbow Rowell, so I will probably end up reading it. But I didn't like it in here so much. But they're quite short bits, so you can do what I did and just skim and get back to the really cute, really relatable, really warm and lovely story going on in here. Next, I read a book that I've been meaning to read for ages, and that is The Unlikely Pilgrimage of Harold Fry by Rachel Joyce. Now, I heard a lot of good things about this. It's been out for a long time, and everyone I know who's read it really, really enjoyed it, and I thought I'd like it. I was sort of preparing myself for it to be quite cute. I didn't think I'd like it as much as I did, and I really enjoyed this. And sort of like Fangirl, I think if you haven't read it already, you really should read it, because it's lovely. That's really the word I can use to describe it. It's just a lovely, lovely book with so many poignant moments that just make you feel all of the things about life. So it is about a man called Harold Fry who is retired and living with his wife in a small village in England, and he's not really doing much. Him and his wife don't really speak, and they're sleeping in separate rooms, and he's just sort of existing. And then one day he gets a letter from an old work colleague called Queenie Hennessy saying that she is dying of cancer. So he writes her a letter back and decides to go walk to the post office and post the letter. But when he gets to the post office, instead of posting a letter, he decides to go walk to the next post office, and then the next and the next and next, until he decides he's actually going to walk to visit Queenie Hennessy across the country. And it's lovely. That's all I can really say. It's just lovely. Reading the book is an allegory for life, if that makes any sense. Harold's journey is like the journey of life. You meet some really great people. You meet some not really great people. Sometimes you feel really convinced of your purpose. Sometimes you feel like you have no purpose. Sometimes relationships fall apart and you have to rebuild them. Sometimes things work out, sometimes they don't. And yeah, just there were so many moments in here where I just stopped and went, wow, that's special. Or wow, the writer captured that really well, or captured a feeling really well. Because I didn't think I could relate to a book about I think 60-something-year-old man. Does it say on the back? I don't think so. I don't think it says how old he is, but I didn't think I could relate to a retired man. Because A, I'm 21, and B, I'm not a man. But I related to him, and I got him, and I got his feelings, and Rachel Joyce did that really well. So next month I'm really hoping to read the companion novel, The Love Song of Miss Queenie Hennessy, which I'm sure is going to be just as lovely. So again, I'm late to this, but maybe you haven't got around to it either. I think it's definitely worth your time. The next book I read you might have heard about from my previous video because I mentioned it there, but otherwise I don't know if you would have heard of this because it is a South African novel. And I live in South Africa and I hadn't heard about it until recently. It is called Moffie, which is how do I say this? Is a derogatory South African slang word for a gay man. It's written by a man called Andre Carl van der Merwe, and it's basically a fictionalized account of Andre's time in the SADF, or the South African Defence Force. Now, I don't know why more people don't have to read this at school in South Africa, because I think it is hugely important. Hugely important. Not, yes, from a history point of view, but just from a human point of view. I think more people should read about this book and know about it. So many people in South Africa don't know about it, let alone the wider world. So I'm going to preach about this book forever and ever and ever. So, without giving too much away, although the plot is kind of self-evident, basically there was a time under the apartheid regime where the South African army conscripted young men to go serve in the army for something like 2 years. It might have been longer at some point, but for quite a while it was 2 years. And you could either go, or you were put in detention barracks for something like 6 years, or you had to leave the country. But A, leaving the country was very expensive, and B, if you left the country you could never come back. So you'd be leaving your family, your friends, your entire life behind. So most young men went. And one of those young men was Andre Carl van der Merwe. Now, his character, or the fictionalized version of himself, Nicholas, is also conscripted, forced to go into the army, but Nicholas is gay. So he's hiding the secret because he's living in a society, or he's grown up in a society that prizes being a macho man, that prizes this idea of masculinity, being a tough man. His father said to him repeatedly over the years, do not embarrass me, this is how you behave, this is how you must be. And when you go to the army is not favourable to gay people at all. They call them muffies, all sorts of horrible words. They do worse things. If they find out you're gay, if they catch you engaging in a gay relationship, they would send people to this ward where they would practice conversion therapy and electroshock therapy and just horrible, horrible things. So this book is about Nicholas's time in the army, where some people would suspect that he was gay and therefore treat him incredibly poorly, about him coming to terms with his sexuality as he falls in love, and just having to accept himself and understand this regime he's growing up in, and how it's not right, and how he's allowed to be gay. So I think this is a particularly important book because it was an issue that I don't think a lot about. I don't think a lot about gay people ending up in the army, but obviously it happens, and I think a lot of militaries around the world are not kind to gay people. And there's a lot of societies, our society, isn't kind to gay men. We prize this idea still, crazily in 2017, we prize this idea of masculinity and femininity, and we don't allow this spectrum for gender and sexuality and all of those things, and then we get at people and treat people horribly if they are slightly different from these ridiculous ideals we have in our head. And this book is really about that, about how ridiculous it is, and how we shouldn't be. And the fact that this really happened to people makes it even more important and poignant, as it gives a voice to experiences that I wasn't thinking of. So if you're not in South Africa, I don't know how easily you get your hands on a copy of this book, but I'm sure you can order it off Amazon. And if you are in South Africa, then you should be able to get a copy from your local bookstore. It's brilliant. It's very difficult to read because for obvious reasons, it was a very difficult life for people growing up in that way, where masculinity was prized so highly, and then they were forced to join the army where masculinity was prized even higher. So it isn't an easy read, it is an upsetting read, but it is an important read. And I think more people should have heard about this book, and more people should read it. The last book that I'm going to talk about for this video is 1984 by George Orwell, and I'm not going to say too much about this because I'm going to do a whole separate video, because I think it is just that important, because everyone seems to be reading it right now. It became a bestseller again for the first time, I think, since it was published. And I did read this quite a long time ago at school, and I really struggled with it because it is essentially more political theory than a novel. So if you've tried to read it before and struggled with it, it isn't the easiest read. I found it much easier to read now, being at university and reading a lot for that. So maybe try it again if you haven't tried it before. Basic plot outline is that a man called Winston is living under this totalitarian regime with this idea of Big Brother. He's being constantly watched, and there's this dictator, and everything he does is being monitored, and he has to even monitor his own thoughts, so everything is in line with the party all of the time. And if he even thinks the wrong thing, there's something called the thought police that will take him away and torture him. And he ends up having this affair with this woman called Julia, and things sort of unravel from there. It really is political theory more than anything else, but it is particularly fascinating right now and particularly important right now. So if you want to know a bit more about that, maybe watch the next video coming out where I'll talk about it in a little bit more detail. But it's important, and I think right now, good time to read. So that is it. That is everything for part 1 of my February wrap-up. I will be back with a video of 1984 and also part 2 of what I've been reading in February. I've just had such a nice reading month. I've read some really great books. I could honestly recommend everything I've read, to be honest. Even the Hemingway book, which I didn't necessarily love, but there were parts that maybe you might like. So anyway, I hope you've had a really good day, and I'll chat to you soon. Bye!